You are listening to Eat Meat Sparingly, a Word of Wisdom podcast. I am your host, Ali Essig. On October 1st, 2019, I found myself rushing into the ER. As I opened the door to the ER room, I scanned the room trying to find my husband. And when I spotted him, he was slumped over in a wheelchair. My heart sunk. He looked like he'd aged 50 years. He was just 37, but looked so old. I knew immediately in my heart that he was suffering a stroke. Part of his face was slanted, and I didn't want to believe what my heart was telling me. As I rushed over to him, he started crying as we hugged, and it was a very traumatic moment. But in order to understand how it was that we got there and all of the steps that led us to where we are today, I need to give you a little bit more background. My name is Ali Essig, and I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I have 6 beautiful children. My husband and I met in D.C., even though we grew up in the same hometown. We went to the same high school, and we served in the same mission. But when I came to D.C. on vacation to visit his roommate, that's when we met. We dated long distance. I moved out to DC. I completed my master's program at the George Washington University. I worked on Capitol Hill for a congressman for years. And then after, when we had our first child, I switched to campaign work, which was a little bit more flexible when you have little kids at home. I worked on a political campaign for an additional 3 years. And then I got to the point when I had 3 kids that it was time to take a step back and just focus on my children. And so all I did at that point was teach Pilates. But as I was teaching Pilates and spin classes and bar classes, people would always ask me, how can I lose weight? How can I eat healthier? And I followed what most people were doing, the traditional way of eating, which is usually prioritizing protein, eating more fruits and vegetables. I tried to figure this out. I was always interested in what is a healthy diet. I grew up overweight. And so I've been kind of obsessed since that point when I was 12 years old and decided to really focus on trying to lose weight. And I did, and I was able to do that. And it's always been an interest for me. But even more so because I grew up with a father who was also overweight, and I was terrified that something would happen to him one day. And back in 2019, when I was in the ER with my husband, we were waiting for hours trying to figure out what was going on. Was it a cranial nerve issue? Was there something else like Bell's palsy going on with his face? Or why was it that my husband was experiencing double vision and that his eye was slanted? As they ran multiple tests, I went home to get some more clothes because we knew that we would be in the hospital overnight. I called my mom, and at that time, she gave me a lot of comfort. But I was reminded when she had called me back in 2012 when my father had passed away. At the time, my father was just 55 years old, and he had suffered his one and only heart attack. It just takes one. There was no second chances for him. And when my mom called me to tell me that my dad was dead, I immediately got on my knees and begged God to bring him back. I was like, Mom, can you just tell the paramedics to work on him again? Is there any way that you can bring him back? And there was no hope. There was nothing that we could do. I felt so completely powerless being in DC with my family back in Utah dealing with all this. I immediately booked a flight, flew home, and had to deal with all that comes when you lose a member of your family. And I did not want that to happen to me, even though I didn't get the answer to my prayer at that point where I had begged God to give my dad a second chance. I was grateful that for my husband, we were getting a second chance, that he was still alive, that his stroke didn't completely paralyze him. We weren't sure how long it would affect his vision. But we went back to the hospital. We had all the tests run. There was no hole in his heart. There was no heart arrhythmia. There was no genetic history. There was literally no explanation as to why a 37-year-old would be suffering a stroke. And so at the time, we were told to meet with a dietitian. And when we did, she gave us a piece of paper that said, from here on out, you need to follow a heart healthy diet. Now, I thought that we had been following a heart healthy diet at the time. In fact, my husband had been losing weight. We had just had number 5 and number 6. I had had twin boys who were number 5 and number 6 kids in our family. They were about 8 months old at the time. And when I gained the twin baby weight, my husband also gained the twin baby weight. And so we had been working to lose weight. And again, following the popular pattern of eating, we were eating more of a macro based plan, higher protein, a little bit lower carbs, nothing too crazy. But it didn't decrease my husband's chance of having a stroke. What it did do was help us lose weight. We had both lost 15 pounds. I had lost about 10 pounds. We were in a healthy space. I thought we were following what is considered a heart healthy diet. But as the dietitian gave me this piece of paper, she said, from here on out, you need to make sure to avoid trans fats, avoid saturated fats, avoid high cholesterol foods, and to eat more fiber. At the time, I was like, does that mean I eat more, I don't know, like fiber one bars? What does that mean exactly to consume more fiber? And I was also told to avoid alcohol. And my husband and I, being members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, we don't even drink alcohol. This is ridiculous. Why was it out of all of the people in the world that it's my husband who had this stroke? I didn't know what to make for dinner. We were in the hospital for 3 days. And for anyone who's gone through a traumatic event, I don't think I've ever been so exhausted as when I came home from the hospital. Even though I had a full night's sleep, I had to go and teach a spin class the day after we got home. And I have literally never been so exhausted in my life. Trauma really affects all parts of you. And because of that, I was so grateful for all of the people that brought food, all of the people that brought cinnamon rolls, brought treats, because I was just so tired that I couldn't even have the mental space to deal with how we were supposed to change our diet. And I was so grateful. But there was also this cognitive dissonance to my husband was just told that we need to follow a heart healthy diet. And this isn't heart healthy. A lot of people did bring some healthy foods, but it was tricky. And I just had to tell myself, you know what, Allie, right now, this is a food is a form of love. Accept the love. Because in the past, you've gone through difficult things and no one knew about it. And it is so much harder to go through trauma and difficult things without the support of those cinnamon rolls and without the support of people just stopping by and giving you their love. And so accept it with gratitude. And we did. And I was able to do that. And I was so grateful. I still am so grateful for that. At the time, my husband couldn't drive. He was having double vision. And so I was the one that had to drive him, even though we had little kids at home. Like I said, I have these twin babies. I had another daughter that was 2 years older than that, and another daughter that was 2 years older than that. We had a lot going on. And so all of the help, I appreciated it. I was so grateful. We were getting rides here and there for our kids' sports activities. We were getting babysitters so I could take my husband to his doctor's appointments. We weren't sure what our future would look like or how long he would be affected with double vision. My husband, a couple weeks later, decided to try and work a little bit, but it was just completely exhausting when you are seeing two screens. And we thought that if we just prayed hard enough, that magically one day he would wake up and his vision would just magically be back to normal. But that's not really how your body heals. Your body takes time. And it's these slow incremental changes that then looking back seem like a miracle. But when you're in it, it's exhausting. It's not an overnight healing. It takes a lot of time. We got blessings. We did everything that we were supposed to do. And then a month later, because it took me a month to just wrap my head around everything that was going on. But a month later, I was told by my brother-in-law to read the book Eat to Live. Now, previously, I had read the book How Not to Die. And in the book How Not to Die, when my friend was telling me that I should read it, this was way before my husband's stroke, about a year before my husband, no, before I even got pregnant with the twins. And when I was reading this book, I was amazed. I was like, this is the word of wisdom. This is what it talks about in the word of wisdom. This is so amazing. But then I got pregnant with twins and didn't really feel like I could put it all into practice. I tried a little bit with some vegetarian recipes, but I was still adding plenty of cheese and cream and all those other things that weren't really helping to keep our diet heart healthy at the time. And so I had actually pulled out the book, How Not to Die, while we were in the hospital. So I could read the section on strokes. And I was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to eat Brazil nuts. We're going to eat more oranges and other things. But I wasn't given a plan. The Daily Dozen seemed really overwhelming to me. So when I was told to read the book, Eat to Live, we listened to it actually literally on our drive to go to the temple. We had a little bit more free time because my husband wasn't working as much. And so we decided to make the drive all the way to Pennsylvania because that is where our temple was at the time. The DC temple was closed. And we were listening to this book. And it was so funny. My husband's like, okay, I think I could possibly give up meat, but I could never give up cheese. But remember, we were given that piece of paper that's like avoid trans fat, saturated fat, cholesterol. And as I was listening, they were telling me that cheese was the number one source of saturated fat in the American diet, that trans fat, because of the trans fat ban in 2020, it that was going into effect in 2020, it wasn't as big of a deal as it had been in the past. You can still find trans fats in fried food and microwave popcorn and in frozen dough, things like that, but it's in smaller amounts. You can also find trans fat in your bakery goods at the grocery store that are just hanging out, like those cakes and cupcakes that could stay on the shelf for days and maybe even a week. That obviously, if you made it by hand at home, those type of foods would not last as long. They put in trans fat so that it can last longer. The problem is it's not good for your heart. And then cholesterol is, I realized that some people don't need to worry about cholesterol containing foods because their liver will adjust. That as you eat more higher cholesterol foods, then your liver will just produce less cholesterol. But for about 25% of the population, your liver doesn't do that. So you really do need to be more mindful about things like eggs and other products that have higher cholesterol. And what I learned is that fiber only comes from plants. That's it. When you eat a fiber one bar, that fiber came from plants. And so we need to be consuming more plants. 95% of the population is not eating enough fiber. So as we're driving to the temple, we're listening to this and I'm just getting worked up. I'm like, why doesn't our church understand this or know this or believe this? I was following the typical healthy diet plan, the one that everyone else in my faith was following at the time too, which is the macro base, focusing on protein. And when I went to the temple, I really just prayed. I was like, what do we do? Where do we go? What is health? How do I get my husband's vision back? Because I don't want to lose my husband like my mom lost her husband. And like my mom's mom also lost her husband too early because of the lifestyle choices that they were making. And I wanted to be able to do something that was in my power. And what was in my power was the dinner that I made every night for our family, was the groceries that I chose to buy. And so I went and was like, okay, this is what agency is, right? Agency is having hope that your future can be better if you make different choices. And so I was willing to change. And when I went to the temple and was praying, I have never felt so excited. Sorry, let me get emotional about the word of wisdom. My heart just exploded. Follow the word of wisdom. Follow the entire word of wisdom. This feeling of just total, complete excitement. So I get in this lesson room and I open up the word of wisdom and I'm like, this is confusing. I thought we were supposed to avoid gluten. What's going on? But at the time, what really stood out was a couple of things. Number one, in Doctrine and Covenants 89, in verse 12, it says, yea, flesh also of beasts and of the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. I am not an all or nothing person. Like I am not, you cannot get me to follow rule 100%. So I loved this. I love that I didn't have to be vegan. I don't want that title. I don't want that pressure, even though I actually really now love making vegan recipes most of the time. But I love that God gave us some nuance when it comes to nutrition, that it doesn't have to be black or white, but he is very clear about why we should be doing it sparingly. Because in the next verse, in verse 13, it says, and it is pleasing unto me, and it is pleasing unto me, the Lord, right? That they should not be used. Now there's a comma there that says only in times of winter or of cold or famine. Now there's a lot of drama around this comma, what I came to understand later on, and the fact that that comma was placed there later on when they were doing revisions and edits. So people argue like it's pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or famine, that you should be eating meat all the time. That is what is pleasing unto the Lord. And I guess that would make sense if it weren't for the fact that the previous verse specifically says sparingly. And so I looked up what is the definition of sparingly? And it is limited amounts, occasionally. And then if it wasn't clear enough, if you go down to verse 14, talks about grain, like I said, and I'll get in future episodes, I'll talk a lot about grain, but it says all grain is ordained for the use of man and of beast to be the staff of life, not only for man, but for the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven and all wild animals that run or creep on the earth. So he's talking about the animals. And then he says, and these, meaning all of those animals, hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. Now, three times. It's so symbolic when in scriptures you read things three times. There's a lot of meaning with the number three. And a lot of times when we are told things over and over again, it's to clarify, to make sure that we are aware. This was so clear to me. I love it. It's not like you can't eat meat at all. You can use it sparingly, as what I encourage. And it pleases me, the Lord, that you don't. And so I wondered, why does it please the Lord if we don't eat meat as often as we currently are doing? If we're doing it more occasionally or in limited amounts or only when we absolutely need it? And then, of course, I talk to friends and they're like, well, now we're always in times of famine and excess hunger. I'm like, really? Out of all the times in this world, we are overfed and undernourished, not because we're not eating enough meat. We're eating plenty of protein. None of us have a protein deficiency. I think that we're undernourished with fiber. We're undernourished with plant-based foods because our priorities are in the wrong place. So that mama bear came out and I took this to heart. Like I said, I walked away with so much excitement. Like, yes, we're going to do this. And I finished listening to the book Eat to Live. He gave an amazing plan on what we could do. So we started each morning, there was recipes and direction. We started each morning with a smoothie. Okay, we're going to put a ton of berries. He's all about adding as much nutrients as possible for as little calories as possible. So we would have a blueberry and spinach smoothie every morning with flaxseed. My husband was eating that. And so it was a delicious smoothie. And then for lunch, I prepped a ton of salads, just cut up a ton of lettuce, beans, and all of these other veggies to put on top, because in Eat to Live, he encourages you to eat a pound, yes, a pound of raw vegetables a day. And then on top of that, another pound of cooked vegetables, and to eat a cup of beans every single day and only about one serving of grains. So we were eating a ton of food. And I realized that you don't need animal protein to feel full and satiated. You just have to eat enough food, and you really have to eat enough beans. Now, as many of you know, beans are the magical fruit. Then the more you eat, the more you may toot. And that was definitely our experience. Now, for me, not so bad. I feel like I was eating plenty of veggies, that it wasn't that bad. But for my husband, there were definitely some stinky side effects for a long time. And had I not had that experience where it was like, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to follow, had I not had my super strong why, I would have given up. And I totally, completely understand why other people give up on a plant-based diet the week they start, because there's just too much bloating and gas. And I totally understand why so many people are like, vegetables want to kill you. Vegetables are terrible for you. They're good, because we experience these side effects. But what we don't understand is, just like a personal trainer encourages other people to go to the gym and to lift weights, and that it's only lifting weights that you can get stronger. But if someone goes to the gym and they lift weights and they're sore the next day, they're going to be like, I am not going to do that. Are you kidding me? That's more pain than it's worth. I would rather live my day-to-day life without that pain. And that's people who are eating more fruits and vegetables. They would rather live every day without that pain. But just like going to the gym, and just like really pushing your muscles, over time, it gets easier. Over time, your muscles adjust, they grow. And it's the same thing with your gut microbiome. Over time, you're going to develop a stronger army of gut microbes that can digest all these variety of foods. And what I've learned since then, if I were to go back and do it again, luckily that didn't stop us. But as I work with people through my program, because it can stop them, I tell them just go low and slow. Just eat a little bit less. Don't go overboard overnight. Remember, it's eat meat sparingly. So you can take time to adjust as you slowly ease into this lifestyle. Start with one plant-based meal a week and then move on from there. So after it took a month for the gas and bloating to finally back down, and we probably wouldn't have kept with it except for this. My husband's vision started to come back. And when you are sick, when there's something wrong with you, you're willing to put up with other consequences of uncomfortable gas and bloating. If your vision is coming back, if you can drive again, if you can work again, and if you're losing weight, if your cholesterol numbers are improving, if your triglycerides are improving, we saw so much improvement. We saw the hidden treasures that are truly found when you choose to follow the word of wisdom completely. And so after about a month, again, my husband lost 20 pounds without even trying. He was like, this is amazing. I can eat whenever I want. If it's a fruit or vegetable, I just eat it. It's great. He didn't have to count anything. Where previously we were counting macros, we were counting calories. There was a lot of counting. And now he could just eat an unlimited amount. The negative side effects soon dissipated. Yes, he was chewing a lot. In fact, my husband was like, I feel like I'm a cow because I'm just chewing all day long because there was so much food, so many salads, but it was worth it all because of the benefits. And then 5 months later, as again, it took a slow, long process, but 5 months later, my husband's vision completely came back. It wasn't until March of 2020. And you know, that March, it literally was my husband's vision came back the week that the world shut down. So then we had to deal with COVID. But at the time, I decided every Sunday night that I was going to figure this plant-based diet out. I was so excited about that. I was going to write on my personal stories and my personal Instagram about what I was learning. So every Sunday night, I would say, this is what we're doing. These are the recipes that we tried, and this is what I'm learning, because I couldn't wrap around my head that this would be good for something like diabetes. I'm like, but wait, aren't we told to avoid starch? That's all I'm doing. So how in the world could this benefit someone with diabetes? And then I read books like Mastering Diabetes. And oh my gosh, it not only helps people with diabetes, it's the best diet for people with diabetes. It helps you to use less insulin overall. Even a keto, low carb diet, you're not decreasing the amount of insulin you're injecting. You're actually using the same amount, but all you're managing is the symptoms, the sugar that's in your bloodstream, the glucose. If you stop eating that sugar, then okay, your blood sugar numbers go down. But if you eat the same exact meal on a keto diet, and then after eating plant-based for a while, you'll see that you are having to use less insulin, because insulin is the key that unlocks the door that lets glucose into the bloodstream. And I learned that as you're eating high saturated fat diets, that can clog up the lock. And so insulin can't do its job properly. The center of insulin resistance is eating a high animal-based diet. And while it can help with the symptoms, it's not changing the underlying issue. And that was just one of many things. I studied gout. My brother-in-law has gout. I'm like, can a plant-based diet help? Oh yeah, turns out it totally can. Then I had other friends with fatty liver disease, but that's a high meat, high sweet issue. And so if you're backing off on your animal products, if you're backing off on the soda, you're also going to improve your fatty liver disease. I literally went through every single disease that I could think of every single week and dove into it and shared what I was learning on Instagram. I was becoming a little crazy. Sometimes when we dive into these things, we get really obsessed. And I was like, plant-based eating is the only way. It's the one and true way of eating. Why aren't we doing it? But as I have since now started a plant-based eating membership, a plant-based eating program where I help people transition to eating more plants, I've learned a very important lesson. And that is sometimes things are nuanced. Life is not black or white. We live in the gray area. And just to clarify and to close things off, that's why I love that in the word of wisdom, it's sparingly. It gives you that flexibility because two things can be true. In fact, a dietitian named Desiree Nielsen posted this on her Instagram stories. And I was like, this is it. This is exactly how I feel. This is exactly what I've come to understand. She says, two things can be true. You personally might benefit from eating more protein. And there is no benefit to eating more protein than you need. She said, hitting your protein targets may help you feel more full and satisfied. It may support muscle growth and tissue repair. And hitting your protein targets doesn't mean you're eating a healthy diet. She said animal foods are more concentrated forms of protein. They're a great source of protein. And a dietary pattern high in animal products has been shown to be less healthful than a dietary pattern high in plant foods. She said vegan meats are ultra processed, and so are protein powders. But that doesn't mean that either is bad for you. She said plant-based proteins are higher in carbs than animal proteins. And carbohydrates are protein sparing, which means that carbohydrates help preserve muscle by allowing protein to be used for its primary functions rather than for energy. So when you don't eat enough carbs, your body may break down protein and use that, which is your muscle tissue, instead for fuel. So maybe let's not be so afraid of carbs. She said, we're obsessed with getting enough protein, even though most of us are getting enough. But 95% of us aren't getting enough fiber. So why aren't we more concerned about fiber? There's so many things that I want to get into when it comes to eating more like the word of wisdom suggests. And that's what all of these future episodes will be about. I want to dive into specific topics, whether it's eggs and cholesterol, or whether it's more about Alzheimer's disease or other specific disease where plant-based eating can be helpful and where it might actually be more nuanced. I want to bring truth to nutrition so that it's not just this black or white. It's this way or that way. It's carnivore or it's vegan. I want you to see the benefits of how God outlined it, that sparingly, it's okay. You don't have to live a black or white lifestyle. I don't, even though at this point, as I have tried to share my message with the world, I have a vegan YouTube channel with over 50,000 subscribers. And guess what? I'm not completely vegan. Sometimes when I travel, I'll have animal products. Sometimes if my mom is feeding me a dinner that I grew up on and it has animal products in it, I'll eat it because it's good. But I think as we move closer to this lifestyle, we will see so many benefits. And it's outlined. In fact, in Doctrine and Covenants, section 89, verse 19 says, and we shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures. There are so many hidden treasures that I hope you are ready to discover. I hope you are willing to maybe use your agency and just change, do something different, so that you can live true to this promise. In verse 21, it says, and I, the Lord, give unto them a promise that the destroying angel shall pass by them as the children of Israel and not slay them. I know that had my dad followed the word of wisdom completely, that he may still be around today. I know that. I know that my husband in his patriarchal blessing is promised with health, with a long, healthy life, if he follows the word of wisdom. There are beautiful blessings that come, and it's not black and white, but as we just try to eat more plants, you can see the benefits too. All right, I'm excited to dive in future episodes. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Eat Meat Sparingly, a Word of Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Ali Essig. And if you need more help and support with transitioning to eating more plants so you can lose weight and feel better, improve your gut health, and just reduce your risk of chronic disease, then make sure to check out my PlantWhys membership. That's PlantWhys, because I like to teach the why behind eating more plants. But if all you need is just a couple more delicious recipes that feed your family and everyone loves, and not to mention super simple and easy, then make sure to check out my YouTube channel, which is also PlantWhys, PlantWhys. Hope to see you there.